to reintroduce the sugar beet project. I'm Iain Riddell. I work as a business development manager for SEC Consulting, and with me to describe it as well, I've got Allan, who is a farmer from Fife and also an NFUS past president. I'm going to hand over to Allan to introduce the project before I go through what we actually did. Over to you, Allan.
Thanks, Iain. And interestingly, the concept came from others here, from the industry. And it's great that we have a huge industry at Grangemouth there that is actually looking to decarbon their side and to go away from fossil fuels. So the approach was actually to the farming side to say, well, actually, can you be part of the answer here? Can you produce ethanol from this crop? And how would you go about it? From a farmer's perspective, sharing in that benefit here would be massive. Having a market on a doorstep and then having the consumer to buy into what we're doing here does actually help us to proceed to the net zero from a farming perspective and the industry in Grangemouth. So again, I'll hand over to Iain. That's the exciting bit here, to be part of this process and to be part of the answer. Okay. I'll hand over Iain to the process we went through.
Thanks, Allan. I'll just reiterate what our objective was to grow sugar beet, reintroduce the crop to Scotland to produce bioethanol, which could help to decarbonise Scottish industry. So we weren't growing it for sugar, we were growing it to either replace fossil fuel as an additive for road transport fuel, or for making bioplastics. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, how we tackled the question, we actually worked at it for quite a while before we formed the risk group. We were fortunate that the National Non-Food Crop Centre had undertaken a feasibility study commissioned by Scottish Enterprise on this subject, and this was initiated by BioIC and the Scottish Enterprise. So that was very useful, it was largely favourable, and then we picked up on it. And by we, I mean SEC Consulting, the James Hutton Institute, and the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre. So we worked away, we had 3 or 4 meetings, because we knew before we introduced it to farmers, we'd need to get our story lined up. We publicised this initial meeting, contacted NFUS and our offices to promote it. So we held an open meeting in Dundee. We weren't sure what the reaction would be and who we'd get. We were really delighted to get 45 people, and they were largely positive about the whole process. We went through growing the crop because a number of our guys were growing the crop for anaerobic digestion plants, which I didn't know before. The chemical industry objectives, because this has been driven from the chemical side, and we had discussions. So that was all very good. Next slide, please. So following that, we formed a risk group. I asked for volunteers. So in addition to SRUC, GHI and BioIC, we added in 4 farmers who are growing sugar beet for AD plants, contractors, leaders of 2 or 3 different co-ops, SEOS, agricultural trade, and people with trials experience. We held monthly meetings, and like many of the risk groups, we had 1 face-to-face, thankfully, and then we were virtual. We had these meetings, plus we had subgroup meetings. Huge amount of activity went on there. We were very lucky that one of our farmers volunteered to obtain seed. He got in touch with other farmers across Scotland, so we're able to set up look-see demo plots on 4 farms, and we're analysing that data now. Also plots at GHI. And crucially, we set up a WhatsApp group. I think we all do nowadays, but that was absolutely vital to share experiences, pictures, videos of lifting sugar beet, everything in between. And a press release highlighting our ambitions, because we wanted to flag up our project and let others know we were here. But at the same time, we needed time to develop it. Next slide, please. Some of the things we investigated, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but was growing the crop, so we're monitoring progress. It's obviously a very capital intensive process with specialist harvesting equipment. So we had a subgroup to look at that. We brought in SEOS to look at co-op models, structure, governance, how they might be set up. And we were fortunate to benefit from the expertise from East of Scotland Growers, the veg co-op. On publicity and influencing, we had a number of people involved in the communications side within our group, because it was vital that we had a strong strategy before we talked to government ministers, potential investors and farmers. And in the carbon credit issue, this is the big question for us. We are trying to decarbonise Scottish industry, but how does agriculture, which is in a different inventory, benefit from that, and how do farmers benefit financially in some sort of way from producing this crop. And the last slide, please. The one big thing that was missing was a feasibility study, a follow-on feasibility study. The group has continued since RIS. We finished in August, and now we've been meeting monthly for 6 months with calls 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. The great news is, last week we heard with viability funding secured. Why do we need this second one? Well, we need this second viability study because we need confidence in how it can work before we can pitch it to others. And it's all chicken and egg. We've got to speak to government, we've got to speak to chemical industry and investors and farmers, and we've got to speak to them all to try and piece this jigsaw together. We need clarity on the co-op model, which I think we do have some good models. We're talking to a potential investor. And the most exciting part or differentiator here is, rather than looking at one processing refinery, as was the case with Cooper up to 1972, we're very interested in looking at micro-processing local hubs so we can make it a smaller scale, more local sort of production. So now I'd like to hand it back to Allan to sum up and conclude our presentation.
1 minute left.
Yes. Interestingly, the question from many would be, well, why don't we just import the feedstock here? You know, France is doing it, America's doing it. I think we have to put pressure on all those involved here to step up to the mark and be part of the answer here and not offload the obligation here, be it from farmers or be it from industry. So again, I think what Iain has covered there, there is a model to follow here. Also enhances the soil. We have a different crop here, another crop. It has been grown in the past in Scotland and it can be grown again. So I'm quite excited as a farmer here to be involved in the process and open to questions from other panel members here.